Malola soifua, malola maili e, tihe moriura, ngā mihi kia atua, me te tupuna, ngā mihi kia te tangata whenua, me te tangata moana, rātou te hunga mata kia rātou, mātou te hunga ora kia mātou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here today. For everyone else, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My apologies if I wasn't able to greet you in your ways. But one of the things that I mentioned is acknowledging the creative energy of the cosmos, those who have come before us, also the peoples of this place, of this territory, of these regions, and also the saltwater peoples who are coming together today as well. Those who have passed on, that we remember, and all of us here collectively who are in the space physically, for your chiefliness, for your chiefly oversights, for any chiefly titles you may hold as well that you bring in with you. And then just greeting you with that. It's my pleasure to do so on behalf of the Tracy Aviary and Jordan River Nature Center. Ko raniera ahau, oko Daniela, mi nombre es Daniel Hernandez, my name is Daniel Hernandez. My parents are from Ishimuleo, also known as Guatemala. That's where I get my brown skin from. But I've been in Aotearoa for the last 8 matariki, and recently arrived, still a little bit jet lagged, and I'm the cultural director here with the Tracy Aviary and Jordan River Nature Center. Just a little bit of housekeeping, should we need it. If you need the water closet, the loo, the wharepaku, whalemalolo, restroom, toilet, bathroom, baños, whatever you call it, they're just right up here. You walk out here, you'll see them right there. Should we need to as well, should an emergency befall us, fire, earthquake, supervolcanic eruption from Yellowstone, zombie apocalypse, or otherwise, run for your lives. But once you've collected yourself, we'll probably just gather here in the car park, if that's needed. At this point as well, in the protocols that I've been trained in, sing a song. However, because of the events of earlier today, I won't mention the scores, but nonetheless, the finals of the Rugby League World Cup took place and Samoa was there. And so, figured it'd be appropriate to do a Samoan song. And I'll ask Papali'i Metuakana here to help me out with it. Wafa afetai, wafa afetai, wamali e mata e vaai. Watasi lava oi, watasi lava oi, io une fa amoi moi. Yamaruia. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce my boss, CEO of Tracy Aviary, Tim Brown, who has worked for the Aviary for 18 years. I want to recognize that in order for the community to care about the Aviary, he understood that the Aviary needed to care about the community. From that point forward, the Aviary actively sought partnerships and opportunities to support the community. Today, the Aviary in Liberty Park is a much different place because of Tim and his leadership. This year, more than 155,000 have visited, and the Aviary is always pushing itself to be more inclusive. The Jordan River Nature Center is an opportunity for Tracy Aviary to make another contribution to the community. Prior to working at Tracy Aviary, Tim spent 10 years at Utah Society for Environmental Education, 7 as executive director. Before that, he was a wildlife technician with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and a river guide. He has degrees in wildlife biology from the University of Vermont and Environment and Community, Antioch University in Seattle. He's from Salt Lake and enjoys all sorts of outdoor activities, so I'll turn the time over to him.
Thank you, Daniel. He's only been here for 4 days. He doesn't know that I'm not really his boss. Because I have class, like I know what's going on. I don't, so the community has built Tracy Aviary, and the community will build the Jordan River Nature Center. I just want to plug these 2 great facilities. So if you haven't been to our campus in Liberty Park, you should go there. And I don't know what else to tell you. You're missing out. So go there. If you need help getting there, let us know. Any one of us can help you find your way, get in there, whatever. Exciting news is the Nature Center. This thing. So right now, we're in this transition campus that started in 2000. We opened impeccable timing, just before COVID shut everything down. So it's a little bit of a slow start, but now we're wherever we are in life. As I look around at the mass, we're clearly not past COVID, but we're dealing with it, I guess, differently. So this transition campus is maybe a quarter acre, what you're in right now, and we've got this little fence here. Our aspirations are to build a fence around this entire area, 12.3 acres, and we're going through amazing bureaucratic hurdles, but we're getting very close to launching with the construction. So, AIM planners in the group? Yeah, I'm not a planner either, but I've learned a lot about planning recently. And so you have to, as it turns out, get a lot of things signed off and approved and commission meetings and stuff like that. But we're there. And so we're going to fence. We've got this all fenced right now, and then we're going to fence the rest of it in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll start construction on what we're calling phase 2, which is from here all the way through here. So by way of orientation, 33rd South is right up there. We're sitting right here. Men's Homeless Resource Center. It's that building right down there. It's the Jordan River. That's 10th West. So by next year, if you do this again here, you'd be parking in this parking lot, and then we'd be walking over to this facility. But we'll also have a bird blind and an observation tower over here, restrooms, outdoor amphitheater, pavilion, and then just a ton of landscape for us to do a lot of programs with. And so to share more about the programs and what we're going to do, it's my pleasure to introduce Marissa Beckstrom, who is our Nature Center Director. It started July 25th.
Yeah, still also very new. So, hi everyone. We are so thrilled to have this event here today. It is a great honor to host you all, so thank you. It's great to have all these minds all in one space. I would love to hear from anyone who has ideas as we are growing. We're at this really cool time where we are growing into something brand new. So I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to get involved or who has ideas. As far as programming, what we're kind of working on right now is trying to make sure we have something for everyone. We want this to be a nature-based community center. That's what we want to grow into. So we want to make sure that nature feels like there is a space for everyone. One of our favorite programs right now that Ann Terry, our Director of Education, put together is our Hot Drinks Cool Facts program. Every Wednesday morning we walk over to the Men's Homeless Resource Center and we get guests who want to come over. We do a short nature walk and we sit on the porch and have coffee. So it doesn't have to be something intense. It doesn't have to be birding. It doesn't have to be rafting on the river. So we want to make sure that there are a lot of events like that for a lot of different groups as we grow. We have a lot of really great education programs for all ages, so that is what we're working on now. And as we have more space and facilities, like I said, we just want to make sure we have something going on for everybody. So we're excited to be able to grow into that. So yeah, thank you and welcome. Excited to have you here.
Thanks, Marissa. Happy now to pass over the stewardship to one of the Board of Trustees, Tracy Aviary, also a member of the Pacific Studies Initiative.
Hi everyone, aloha mai kako. Thank you so much. We're so excited for this esteemed panel, and as a Tracy Aviary board member and a faculty member for the Pacific Island Studies program, welcome you today and welcome you to this space. And as you can see what they're doing in terms of creating this for the community, I've been part of focus groups. I've been part of discussions where this space is really about creating access for the communities that typically don't have access to green spaces or spaces for conservation. So I want to applaud the Tracy Aviary and their efforts, and I want to introduce the Director of PI Studies at this time, Dr. Mande Arvin, who will be welcoming everyone to the event today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. As everyone else has said, we're super excited to be here to kind of help support what Tracy Aviary is doing here. But yeah, so I'm the Director of Pacific Island Studies at the University of Utah. I worked at the U for about 5 years now, and I was hired as part of a larger effort to have more classes and curriculum and programming on our campus that really centers the histories and cultures of Pacific Islanders. Because there's such a large community here in West Valley, in this area, but there had never been kind of a concerted effort to offer those kinds of classes to our students at the U. So I think myself and Kehal Vaughn and Angela Robinson were all faculty at the U, and working on serving our Pacific Islander students better there. So I think, and one thing that we're all just excited about is gardening in different ways. I think gardening for me during the pandemic was a real solace. I'm still a very amateur gardener, but I think Kehal, Angela, and I, through talking about kind of what kind of programming we wanted to see with our Pacific Island Studies program, we're kind of excited to be, well, Angela's work is a lot about the environment and kind of activism that happens in the Pacific and across the U.S. By Indigenous peoples to raise awareness about the environment and climate issues. And so talking about that and talking about just the ways that we ourselves relate to the environment and gardening kind of led us to want to learn more about all of the community gardening efforts that happen here. So that's why we're really excited to have these panelists talk to us about their community gardens and the ways that we all might help get involved and support. Yeah, I think that's it. And then Angela, so this is Angela Robinson, also faculty with us. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a super special thank you to our panelists here today. When, like Miley said, when all of us were sort of dreaming up this event, we were inspired, motivated by our own relationships to gardens and gardening, but really deeply inspired by the amazing work that the panelists here have been doing in the community around gardens and food. So yeah, just a super special thank you to all of you for joining us.
And we also have with us here our Dean, Catherine Von Stockton, and we're super happy to have her with us. She's been such a great supporter and advocate of our program, so I'll introduce her and let her say a few words.
I just want to say this is so exciting to be here, and I just bring you warmest greetings and true collective excitement from the School for Cultural and Social Transformation. And in case you don't know what that is, which would be a logical question, we're a freestanding college at the University of Utah, and we are comprised of ethnic studies, gender studies, disability studies, and the Pacific Island Studies Initiative. And you may or may not know, but Pacific Island Studies has made history at the University of Utah. So in 2018, Pacific Island Studies became the first entity to get the first ever academic Mellon grant in the history of the University of Utah. Hey. The Mellon Foundation is one of the most premier grant-making foundations in the country in humanities and fine arts. And these fine experts that you've been introduced to, and of course a world of community knowledge, was really part of getting that grant. It makes me so happy to know that Pacific Island Studies will always be part of that first ever history-making grant for the U. And then if that wasn't enough, we tried to get a renewal of that grant, and last year, indeed, a second Mellon grant has come. And so now to build this work out further, and possibly with great community consultation and a lot of creative thinking, maybe building a center for Pasifika and Indigenous knowledges. Yes. So this is work that is very much of the heart. And I feel like since we're all here today, I think we all agree that it is the power of community knowledge that will change universities, and has been making people smarter all along. It's one of the fundamental lies of universities, is that they are sort of these closed-off institutions with a group of experts, when it's actually community knowledge that is flowing in every single day and changing that institution. So permit me just to say another word about Miley Arvin, because she is a newly tenured professor in history and gender studies at the U, and I think that's very much worth celebrating. She is a Native Hawaiian feminist scholar, and writes about Native feminist theories, settler colonialism, decolonization, race, gender, and science in Hawaii and the broader Pacific. And if you haven't already read her cool, important book, please do. It is entitled, you may know, Possessing Polynesians, The Science of Settler Colonial Whiteness in Hawaii and Oceania. So I'm going to give this now back to Dr. Arvin.
Thank you all again. That's a lot of intros to get into. We're excited now to actually get to talk to our speakers. One more word is just, we're recording, so Angela and I just started this podcast called Relations of Salt and Stars, and we're really excited to highlight on it, you know, both academics and community organizers who are doing such important work for our communities, both Pacific Islanders and Native Americans and other Indigenous folks. So that's why all the tech is hopefully set up and working. But yeah, we hope that you check out our podcast as well. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Angela and she'll help introduce our panel.
Well, so for our podcast, so that everyone listening can get a sense of your voice, we want to ask you all to introduce yourselves briefly, and in your introduction, say your favorite thing about gardens and gardening. So we'll start with you, Diné.
Okay. That's everyone. Okay, Diné, my people, my relatives. It's beautiful to see so many faces. My name is Denae Shanidin. I am born to the Diné Nation, otherwise known as the Navajo Nation. And that lineage is through my mother. On my father's side, well, for my clan, for my mother is Kanagafi, we're the ones who walk around clan. And I'm also born to the Korean race. So I have that on my father's side. My grandfather's clan is Kintlachini, and my father's father is the Og-Woi. So I'm so grateful to be here. I've lived in Salt Lake City for a long time, most of my life, and really trying to return back home in a lot of ways, in myself, here in my home, my community, but also returning back to my ancestral lands where my grandmothers grew up.
Favorite thing about gardening?
Oh, my favorite thing about gardening, you know, it's just doing it. I think there's so much ancestral knowledge and memory that comes through it. I remember the first time I grew blue corn, which we use for mush. It's one of our very traditional foods. And opening up each ear of corn and just seeing the beauty of those colors and how they congregate together. And then also learning that corn is two-spirit. And just like the food, this beautiful thing in front of you, it's sacred, it feeds you, it nourishes you, it connects you with everything. It has this relationship with the lineage of all relatives that connect us to this beautiful thing that we pray to and eat and that nourishes us. So that's yeah, it's beautiful.
Hi all, I'm Dee Platero. I am born for Edge of the Water Clan and my mother is from Pioneer Settlers. So my paternal side is from, I'm a tribal member of the Navajo Nation as well, so I'm Diné. I've lived in Utah for my whole life, so I'd like to say I've traveled around the state a little bit, lived in southern Utah and northern Utah, and I've loved every bit of it. So I love the red rock and I love the mountains, and I just love being outside, enjoying the nature here. It's a very special place to me because it has a lot of familial roots for myself on both sides of my family. But I'm here from the Pandos organization, and that has brought me a lot of community and also a chance to express interests through my Indigenous interests as well. So, but my favorite thing about gardening is harvesting. I love eating. So that's my ultimate favorite, when I get to harvest something and eat it and make delicious herbs. So that's my favorite.
Yot everyone. I am also Navajo from my father's side and Panamanian from my mother's side. My father was raised in Two Gray Hills, New Mexico. I was lucky enough to live on that land for a short time and also visit as often as I possibly can. I work with Pandas as well, and I'm the current chair of Margarita and Indigenous Relatives Utah. And we work really closely with the Og-Woi garden here in Salt Lake City, and My favorite thing about gardening is I have this vivid memory. I was raised most of my life in Anchorage, Alaska, and it is kind of a strange place for a Navajo to be, but very cool. But my favorite thing about gardening is just the soil there. From my memory of being a child is so rich, and having a garden in my backyard and all the little worms that I would catch and then I would save and then I would go fishing halibut with. So it was like those small creatures that were nourishing the food that I was growing in my backyard went on to go catch meat for me, like when I went deep sea fishing. So that's just a really vivid memory for me of like that connection just to the earth itself, whereas it didn't matter if it was just like coming from the land, it went back into the water and then came back to me. So that's my favorite memory about gardening. It's just, it goes beyond just that, so I love that.
Malolele, my name is Lisia Satini, and I am in connection. She mentioned Og-Woi, so I'm gonna bring that. I was asked to be here on behalf of family members, so we have a mural that sits at the Og-Woi garden. And so one of my favorite things about that place is just being reminded of my sister-in-law who recently passed away from COVID. And so being here, my connection with gardening, I think about my parents raising us to garden just in our backyard. I'm still learning. I'm excited that I just grew some tomatoes. I'm sure that's nothing compared to what all of you guys are all doing, but that was something exciting for me. So we talk about gardening and understanding what vegetable or herb, what it does. I get excited to learn about that. I am Tongan Samoan. I just was learning about, I learned from this my neighbor right here. But from my, I grew up in San Francisco for a little bit, so I was born here in the States, and then moved out to Utah. And so that's my connection with gardening, as well as my husband, who does some, we do some collaborating with, he'll talk more about the Healthy Roots program, but we run a youth program with, for the children, the youth in the west side of Salt Lake. And so it is more of an athletic program, and they do a lot of, we talk about gardening, and just partnered with the Salt Lake City with a community shed, so offering resources there. We'll probably talk more about that. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Jake Fitisemanu Jr. I'm here on behalf of the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition, and when we speak of where we're born, we typically refer to the place where our umbilicus is buried. And so my umbilicus is buried on the island of Maui in a place called Porirua, more commonly known as New Zealand. But my mom's family has roots in Hawaii, as well as China and Korea, and my dad is from Samoa, so that's where this gorgeous mix comes from. Very blessed and honored to be here with my sisters here on this amazing panel, and I'm looking forward to learning from you all today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think our first question that we wanted you all to speak to is just tell us about your garden or your organization, how it got started, and what your program does, or what plans you have, and what communities that you work with and serve. Just so folks can learn more about the awesome work that you all do.
Do you want to go in order again? Go ahead. Okay. So the community I started a garden called Carry the Water. It's located kind of in the Rose Park area. It's about 1 acre, less than 1 acre. The origin of the garden started with a black relative, a black queer relative who really, from their core, understands how to be in good relations You know, based on all the traumas that we experience, shared traumas, individual traumas. And then also they had a connection to a white woman who actually works at the U, Libby Haslam. She is on the board of the Design Build Love program. So we knew that Libby had connections with the Indigenous communities, and I know that they build a lot down in like West Utah, working with Navajo students and trying to do like traditional building practices. So we really trusted, like when you're entering those relationships with white people, you're like, okay, how do I navigate this? But she had this plot of land that she's not using for quite some time, and indefinitely, like the plan is to return that stewardship over that land to community, to the BIPOC community, to the Indigenous community. And so that's still in the process, and I think that will take like years to come to see what that actually turns into, whether we can actually reclaim that for ourselves, if we have to buy it back for ourselves. But right now we're blessed to steward this land, get to know it, and right now, like the garden has started for about a year. We ran into some you know, there's been so much support with community. I think that people are really starting to realize right now how important it is to support the Indigenous communities, especially, you know, the air that we're breathing right now, all the stuff that's going on, how it affects our bodies, these industrialized societies, it all reflects in our bodies, our minds, our spirits. The noise, not having a safe space just for Indigenous people. And so I think that's what those are our values to begin with. But also I think it's turning into, like, you know, this panel and this discussion about kinship and relationships. Anybody who has actually come willingly to that space has been so respectful. They understand the things that we need and require to go on in a good way. A lot of us are displaced from our families, you know, living in these urban environments, from our homelands, from the medicine that grows there. The soil here is very different to a lot of the traditional foods that would grow and nourish us, and also connect us back to our identities and who we are, especially for our children. And I think we're just in that time where we really crave that medicine. It's been taken from us, but there are so many ways that we can just be the work for ourselves and to facilitate that. It hasn't been easy because of personal things. You know, like everyone who is involved in the garden right now, like we're all going through so much, just like I imagine everybody else. But sticking with that medicine and however it grows into that, I think we're just being really flowy and forgiving and not pushing things, and just really honoring where we're at and really understanding and being so grateful to the land for being patient with us. You know, we haven't really grown very much there. There were a few things, but that was a big disappointment because we had like all these big ideas coming into it, like this is what we want now, this is what we need now. But we've been humbled because of all these outside forces and influences that kind of prevent us from being who we are and what we want to do. We're just realizing that it's okay, and it's taking some time. There are other things that we want to be in relationship with besides the plants that teach us. The plants that teach us how to be in relationship with one another and everybody's needs and how they come together. So it's kind of like family. It's going back to these traditional teachings. Like in our way, the Hogan is our universe. We have different relatives that circle around that fireplace, and there are no rooms in our Hogans. And so in that way, I'm like in my family, I'm able to see the pains, the struggles, the needs, the love, the care I'm aware as a relative of what's going on with each individual. And I think about that structure with the garden too, and whoever comes in, like what's going on in your life. Like I want to support that. I want to, and the garden's here to help nourish you. What kind of medicine do you miss? Please, like I invite you to just like grow that there. You have that sovereignty. I want it to be that space for it. And I really hope it grows into it. I don't think it's a lot to ask for. But yeah, we just really want a beautiful, safe place to gather and have ceremony. We want sweat lodge there. We want to be surrounded by our medicine. And just come in and be ourselves. Yeah, so.
I think we both can. So Dee and I work closely together, and so the Og-Woi has been a wonderful place to be able to have the Three Sisters Garden. What's really incredible about that, and then working so closely with murdered and missing Indigenous relatives as well, is that what we do is ensure that like the medicine that is grown there is available to the community. We actually have the founders of the Og-Woi here with us today in the audience, Tom and Dee. They have put their blood into the garden, and of course it's a community space. And so, you know, having that designated plot to grow medicine and to access that and offer that to families has been insurmountable, and it means so much. And I know that we always have like some bag of plants with us, of whether it's sweetgrass or sage or any other sacred medicine. And having that plot and having the relationships with the community has been really incredible. We did a tabling event a couple months back at a powwow in Tooele, and you know, Tom brought some sweetgrass with him, put it on the table, and we had like our brochures and flyers to educate the community about the issues that are still ongoing with murdered and missing Indigenous relatives. And there was a mother who came up to look at the brochures and all the information, but the plants sitting there really like captured her attention, which was amazing that it was even there to begin with. And we started talking about the plant. She was like, "Is this for sale?" And I was like, "No, this is actually like was grown in the Og-Woi garden. It's medicine, you can take it, it's not for sale, it is for free for you to take." And she's like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Yes." And she was telling me how she's gonna use that in her beadwork and how she's gonna create something more from that. Like she was like, "I'm not gonna burn this, I'm actually gonna integrate it into my jewelry and my beading." And so I thought that was really beautiful. Like, I feel like nature itself is like a work of art, the way things start to emerge on their own and have their own like tendencies, and it's really incredible to see how like us as Indigenous people find so many uses for that. Like to be able to see like jewelry or artwork that depicts the plants that we pull from and that are our lifeblood and our stories is really powerful. To see it displayed in different places. So we've also had the ability to have a couple of different organizing events at the Og-Woi as well. Last year we did sage pulling, sweetgrass braiding, and just binding. That was really a powerful event as well. And I think that was close to when the Margarita mural was finished, and that was an incredible event to attend. So I feel incredibly grateful to that tie back to community and the ability to share outside of that and to invite people to know that that's available to them. And just to share like as much knowledge as possible. For my own like home space, like I don't have a garden plot to plant anything. Probably kill it anyways if I was doing everything on my own, but that's what's the beauty of like having a community to teach you that. I'm not used to this type of soil. Like I said, like I grew up in Alaska mostly, and so you put a seed anywhere and it just like blew up in the summer because we have such a short growing season. But the soil here is really different, so it's amazing to see how much I've learned just like from community events, even at the Carry the Water Garden as well. The community events there have been really impactful, and I've attended a couple, and just being able to eat and gather in that space has been really magical for me and transformative. I've only been here for probably a little over 4 years now. And becoming involved and connecting more with my community through these types of like events and programs and through the garden itself has been really like transformative and beautiful for me personally, especially since that's not something like I have at my house at home. I don't own land technically. So it's a cool escape to go to and also share that with other people. What's also been really great too is the former chair, Jen. She has moved to Seattle, but she also has connected with gardening communities there. We've been working with a coalition there called Canoe Journey, and they've also been supplying us medicines as well, and that we've been able to share with individuals here too. So just like building networks, and I think that's really beautiful and very rare, I feel, like in everyday life. Just to have that space and those types of relationships to talk about plants and how they nourish us, and also how they develop like relationships, like one-on-one within the community.
And just to add on, because that's all very beautiful, I just want to know, did anyone have Indigenous teachers growing up, like K through 12? Yeah, me neither. Okay, so one person, I'm already jealous, you know. But what has been really impactful to me about the garden, or you know, what Tom has provided us, where we have an opportunity to do this, is learn and practice like Indigenous teachings, which I didn't have a space before. And even if I had, you know, my own space at home, it's not the same. It's bringing together as a community, braiding sweetgrass together, and learning how about just these plants that we're growing is really beautiful. And just to share a fun story, we did an MIW event and planted the garden, and we took some tea home with sweetgrass and tobacco, and just little seedlings. I will say that I'm really glad my tobacco is still alive, but just on the way home, someone noticed my jacket, and I had taken some extra tea and some seedlings, and her aunt had just died like 2 days beforehand. And it was just really wonderful that I got to just in that moment share the medicine from this garden with her that I had just had by chance. And it's just those kinds of moments where you realize that there are so many people who are connected. We're all connected in so many beautiful ways, but it's just there for us. And this is an opportunity that I've had to reach out and connect with other people in a way that I haven't been able to do in any other kind of setting. So, yeah, I love that.
And for sure, like receiving, when someone gives you medicine, like it really, I can't explain the feeling, like it's just like thank you.
It's like another type of deeper love.
Yeah, like thank you for seeing me, and I did need this, and it's so special to me, and it goes beyond any kind of material. It's just, yeah, we need more of that, and I think those spaces allow you to like act that way. You know, in other spaces we code switch or we change, we do all these other things, but to practice being sacred with one another, and like really being aware of those things, like you need this, I want to give this to you, you know?
I love how she shared about the the mural and the event. So when I think about what kind of events or what kind of work we've done, we do a lot of, she mentioned networking, collaborating, healthy roots. When she talks about there's not space or land, they've donated plots where just with our Jayhawks Youth Program, the kids were able to learn about nourishment and nutrition and adding that part into just their lifestyle. And then, as I mentioned before, Margarita, she was one of the founders for UPASEC, which is the Utah Pacific Islander Civic Engagement Coalition, which is connected heavily with we're all connected with the Health Coalition. And we don't grow in all 4 seasons, we're very tropical. And so when you go to the garden, there's a raised garden bed, and you'll see some tropical flowers there. Thank you for Healthy Roots bringing that. And that space brings a lot of self-care, just a place to reflect, to bring peace, to process grief, just not only for our family members, but also the community. So when we talk about these spaces, that's what it has provided for us.
Well, Healthy Roots is a program that we've been running through the Pacific Islander Coalition for almost 6 years now. And it started with a pretty selfish, self-serving motive, which was our foods are sometimes hard to get here. And when they do get here, they've survived weeks on a ship, and sometimes they're not that great, or they're coated in wax, or they're expensive. And which is why our people eat a lot of canned foods, actually, and preserved foods, and that's not great for nutrition in the end, and that's not what our ancestors ate. That's not our indigenous food ways. And so a few of us really wanted to just try it here. We knew the growing season was short, as was mentioned. We knew the soil was different, that the composition, so we kind of nerded out, and we went out and said, who can help us? And we called into gardening shows. We got folks from Utah State Master Garden Program to help us. We went to our own elders in the community who know how to grow these things back home, and started pretty small scale with about 3 families. And the next year that turned into 10, and the next year turned into 25, and the next year we had a commitment with, or a contract with Wasatch Community Gardens, which was now giving us space, because a lot of our folks live in the urban areas or apartments and don't have that space. And then we started taking it to people's backyards, and long story short, this summer, this year, we had 52 families that were engaged in this. And they're not only growing tomatoes and corn and the great, things that are meant to grow here, or that have been growing here in this climate, but we're growing taro, we're growing tapioca, we're growing turmeric, we're growing banana trees, we're growing hibiscus, we're growing lao tea, we're growing sweet potatoes. Things that our people will eat, because we don't eat kale and we don't eat celery and some of these other things. Not because they're not good, but because we're not familiar, and we don't have recipes already with these things built in. And so I don't follow directions well. I didn't even answer the prompt question earlier, but to that's my favorite part of being with this. And I'm not a master gardener either, but when I see people, one of my favorite things is when I see people in West Valley, right here, where I live and where I serve on the city council. I love people rolling down my street, 4250, and sort of taking it slow and looking out their window like, are those banana trees? Are those really, 8-foot tall sugarcane and growing in front of the house? And there are 52 other families this year that are doing the exact same thing, and they're able to harvest. And so we do have to work with greenhouses, with the Granite School District. We have a contract with their GTI program, where their young students in GTI are growing the seedlings in December, January, February, March, so that by the time we can plant them around Mother's Day, they're already big and strong. We can put them in the ground and they can last, and we can harvest. Our old folks have been watching the stars this week, Wednesday, just a couple of days ago. The Matali'i, which is an important constellation that marks our harvest season, rose for the first time this year at sunset, which means that next Thursday, which is the new moon after the rising of Matali'i, is our new year. This is our harvest and our bountiful season. It doesn't look like it here in Utah, but in Samoa and in Tonga and other places in the Pacific, they're celebrating their first fruits festival next Thursday, and I'm really happy and grateful for our partners here that will be doing the same in this very building and out here, watching the new moon and the stars rise next Thursday, or next Wednesday, right? And presenting those fruits. And so we present them to our families, to our chiefs, to our ancestors, including Rita. She's an ancestor now. We'll be presenting to her. And that's actually my favorite part about the gardening, is that the plants teach us. The plants in our culture they have stories, they have genealogies. There are certain vegetables that are our ancestors, that we descend from. And it's cool to work with these kids at the Granite School District and teach them not just about the nitrogen cycle and all these cool, biological photosynthesis, but also remind them, like, bro, we have an actual connection. Our genealogy links us to these plants, and they nourish us not just physically, but spiritually. And that's what we're trying to do on a small scale. We're always sad every year, because even though we have great funding sources and we have great operational partners, we can never serve as many families as we have lists that want to participate. So even though we serve 52 families, that's awesome, but we have 12 families on the waiting list who we couldn't. And then when people start posting like, oh yeah, I grew my own sugarcane and I used it in this dish, and then people on Facebook see that and they come back and they want to sign up next year. And so capacity is definitely something that we struggle with, and scaling this to where we can keep it sustainable. But we'll continue to work with operational partners, and our ancestors will continue to provide so that we can keep expanding and improving this program as we go forward. Thanks.
Thank you all so much for those beautiful answers. You know, you all kind of spoke to this a little bit, but maybe you could go a little bit deeper and talk about why gardens, why gardening, why food, yeah? So thinking about, you know, missing and murdered Indigenous women, honoring Margarita Satini, why gardens?
Gardens. You know, I don't even know if they were called gardens. Like when I go back to thinking about how my people grew food, it wasn't a garden. It was the connection to the season, the stars, how we pray with our corn pollen, how we bless our young ones, how we communicate with the holy people, and all these plants, relatives who like teach us things. You're really, when you're in pain and you're grieving, there is a certain medicine that has a certain teaching that really eases like your heart and your spirit, and it nourishes you.
So can I have apples?
And you also can see it when like, you gift it to somebody else, when you administer that medicine to somebody else. I also been thinking about plants, the soil, plants that we see nowadays, like especially maybe in these areas, like, oh, this plant's interesting. It's not from here, but it's beautiful, we're gonna plant it here. And that's done some damage with, you know, the whole landscape as in the bigger picture. With like invasive species, but I had a relative, a sister from the Changa Los Angeles band in California, and she was talking, there's a lot of invasive plants in California that take over their traditional medicines. So when she was talking about it, she talked about it in a way of empathy. Like these plants are also so very much displaced from their homelands. And like look at them thrive and survive. And when I think about what it means for displaced relatives, even being like a climate refugee. So many of us are climate refugees. So many of our homelands have been destroyed. Uranium, coal, water contamination, like that gold key mine that was built into the San Juan, that ruined farming for years for our relatives. And so I think bringing in the medicine that you need in your space is like reclaiming that, and also like healing that part of you, that connection to home that you don't have access to, and that hurts. Like it hurts for everybody. And I think there's like a beautiful grace in that, and like thanking the land that we provide something for my traditional foods to grow, and like really thanking it, like thanking the land for doing that for you. Everybody needs it personally, but I think collectively it is more interesting when you feed off of one another and you do have those teachings, and like being moved and honored by like you honoring your relative who you miss, that grief. The process of like planting something and having that grow, there's that, the healing capabilities for your spirit and your mind in that is far more effective in my opinion than like the therapy, this shitty healthcare system that we have, all these bigger structures that harm us. Like it's so simple. And I love that simplicity, and I think we need to return to that simplicity to help us go on with otherwise.
I'll just give some of my personal thoughts, but to me, gardens are the solution for permaculture. I know that Og-Woi started as an act of civil disobedience to reclaim like land itself or like re-nourish it and what it could be. To me, it has been transformative, at least for myself. I've become more interested in gardening and relating, and also just as a person, again, just embracing the connections between my body, the plants I eat, the people I communicate with, and my community as a whole. It's made me feel more like a earthling than just a human being. So I'm just honestly just excited to see what happens. I know that this garden is relatively new, but I just imagine or envision it taking up the entire Jordan River right there, but we'll see. Yeah. What about you, Michelle?
My gardens, I feel like from the earliest memory I have of actually like planting something and watching it grow, it's almost like it's teaching you about what's gonna happen to you itself, like the cycle of your own life. And it's in a smaller, like more visible way. I think just the observation of it is really remarkable and fascinating to me. But just a reminder that everything has its season and there are cycles to everything. I think like you see some of the seeds that don't come up and do not grow and that fail, and I felt a lot of that failure because I am not super good at gardening, and so I feel grateful for those who have taught me better ways of doing. But I think like I've seen a lot of seedling failure for me, and it reminds me about something about us as human beings, that some of us cannot produce and some of us do, and we have our our fruits that we bear, and eventually we will die as well. And so I think there's something really spiritual about that type of knowledge being taught to you in a non-verbal way. And I think the relationship of like cultivating something became way more important to me. So it's really fascinating. I have recently, since moving to Utah, I went from Alaska to New York, and I lived in New York for 7 years in the city. And then when I moved here to Utah, I decided I was going to start committing to having plants again, because there was no way out of my Manhattan apartment I was going to start growing anything and then having to move or something like that. So I committed to having a tree in my house. And so I've been cultivating that tree for probably 3.5 years now, and it's amazing that it's still alive. But I've also found that technology has helped me a lot in terms of trying to figure out how to keep this alive. And it's this huge bird of paradise tree, and it's almost like too big for my place now at this point, but I feel really accomplished having done that and having learned about this particular plant and developing this emotional relationship with it. It made me sad when I saw the little parasites starting to come out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? The leaves are starting to wilt. And so through the years I've had to repot, replant. It's been teaching me how to take care of it, and I feel like its size itself was unignorable for me. So it taught me, I'm like, okay, I can't let this huge thing die. I need to figure out what it needs from me. What do I need to do for it to keep it going? Because I want to keep it with me, which it's crazy to think that you have such an emotional tie back to plants. But really, as Indigenous peoples, we know that our ancestors saw ourselves not so different from them and as a part of them, and as you pointed out, as our ancestors themselves, a space where we come from, that we're derived from. So I've developed this relationship with this plant, and it's taught me so much, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think that's part of like, you know, I like to garden at this point. I don't think it was something that I was super interested in back in my early 20s, but when I was a kid, I remember the magic of it all, and I feel like that magic is coming back to me. That interest is reignited, and connecting with others and figuring out new possibilities, new things to grow, and new ways of doing. So I think that's why it's become something really special to me.
Say why garden? So the first thing that came to my mind was it's the Pacific Islander way. It really is. Our attire, you see the clothing we wear to celebrate. You'll see bark, you'll see feathers, you'll see leaves. We wear it. We eat it. Land is everything to us. It's a time for us to connect. Even if I've been to Jake's house and he'll tell me like whatever he's growing and I get excited. But I'm like, it's a time to connect. Even I tell Chamali who's here, we had the Silas, which is the Tongan Bikers Club. They came and helped out, set up the community shed. Who would have thought Bikers Club and gardening, right? So it's a time to collaborate. So I think connection, when you talk about gardening, I think it's just our Pacific Islander way to just garden. It's part of us, who we are. Like I said, we wear it, we eat it, it's everything.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I stumbled across gardening quite accidentally, not intentionally. And now I see it as, why gardening? I see it as such a powerful tool for pedagogy and learning. And now that I have little kids and I realize that I'm not getting younger, I feel this sense of urgency to pass on whatever I had gleaned from my parents and grandparents and what I continue to learn. And we learn in pedagogy, right, that there are folks who are visual learners and auditory learners and tactile learners. And the more of those different contexts we can present information in, the better, hopefully, it will stick with students. And so with my kids, when I say my kids, I mean everybody's kids, whoever's participating around us, I have learned that gardening touches on everything, because you're hearing the wind rustling through, you're seeing things grow, you're touching the soil and the seeds, and you're harvesting, and you're tasting, right? You don't get that from flashcards. You can't taste, well, you could taste a flashcard, but you're using all the senses. And not only that, to what my sisters have mentioned, there's a spiritual connection to it, right? Not in terms necessarily of religious fervor, but I think that's one that as professional educators, we don't talk about a lot. We talk more about, the auditory and visual and tactile and interpersonal connections. But I think gardening touches on all of our senses and also connects us to the things that are not seen and are intangible. And for me, that's why I see gardening as working. We're passing on stories as well as scientific knowledge and a little bit of school stuff here and there. But it's a way that presents that material to young folks and old folks and adults in a way that touches all the different senses and also touches the soul. And that's, for me, why gardening.
Well, thanks so much. I think we have maybe one more question, and then we can open it up to the audience. I think this set of questions was, I think you've all spoken to already, but if you have any more ideas on this, how does your garden program draw from Indigenous ways of knowing and being? How is it connecting Indigenous communities? And how have communities really been engaging with these programs? I know you've all spoken to all of that already, but if you have other thoughts you'd want to share.
The garden had started out with a TANF grant, something for needy families. We got a good amount of money. And our goal with the grant, because we do a lot of missing and murdered work or responding to that violence, we wanted to do, first of all, that work is really hard. And
relates to gardening. Gardening, being in community with your relatives who see you, who already understand you, who recognize you as a person, as a spiritual being, without these titles, without like these credentials. They're just our relatives, especially our youth and our elders, and their caretakers, and how they take care of, you know, that in-between stage of those life periods. We struggle a lot in our communities because of colonization. You know, it's given us a lot of violence to deal with in our bodies. We are also perpetuators of violence in ourselves, onto our relatives. And we saw the garden being a program for youth to connect with ancestral teachings as a violence prevention measure for sexual violence, and the big one, the umbrella one, which is missing and murdered violence. And all those things, the displacement from land, resource extraction, climate chaos, the domestic violence, the sexual assault, all these different things fit underneath missing and murdered violence. And so it's hard always responding to the crisis because it's ongoing. It's ongoing. And so we really needed a place to just like be ourselves in that space. I needed that. I was in a place where I, you know, suffering from depression, suicidal ideations, feeling the pain, being re-traumatized by, you know, I lost my auntie, she was murdered. I have a relative here, Shannon Scott. She's Kittnachini, so she's my father's clan, or my grandfather's clan, so we're relatives. And I found her through the garden. And we met there and we made that connection. She's my family. Shannon Scott was murdered and she had 2 babies. And like having those babies there and recognizing them, like getting down on the ground and looking at them and just like holding them. That's like the hard, I know how hard it is. I know the manifestations of like that trauma and how it goes into like your life. I saw it with my sister Samantha. She was 3 months old when she lost her mother. And that's in her body. And it's manifested into all these like other health things. Food, whether our relatives are responsive to it. You know, sometimes we can be like, oh, this will heal you, this will heal you, yoga will heal you, just being in the community, or growing something's gonna heal you. Some people aren't at that place. I'm not at that place a lot of the time. Like, I don't have the energy to do that. It's like, no, I need this things first. But the growing things and just being yourself, however you show up, however you're affected by colonization, however that you want to heal, that space should be for you. And making those connections is a huge safety net for our young ones especially. I think it's really important to be aware of how they need to feel safe in a world that's getting really more chaotic and violent and confusing and encroaching in on us in every single way. So establishing spaces that, one, it is like a distraction, but it's the best kind of distraction because it's returning back to our ways. And we're adapting. Our Indigenous people have adapted for time immemorial to our environments and to different relations. And I think in those ways, through prayer, we can really see together how to heal these things. Because we do embody so much knowledge. And I think that needs to be recognized. We are the experts of our own realities and our hurts and our pains. And it should be us who who guide that process.
I'll take a minute to digest everything. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is this idea of sovereignty and self-sufficiency. And again, I know that our garden is still small, but those are the kinds of principles I think about. Another big thing that's always in my mind is always climate change. And no matter what kind of avenue I seem to go down, whether it's social justice, human rights, all these big kind of things that are coming, I always come back to like gardening as the solution. And I think the experts in our gardening space are Indigenous people because they've had the most experience over time and land and wisdom, years, that they have that knowledge. So to me, it just makes sense that we need to remember or connect with however you see that in yourself. So like, for example, Tyson Yonkaporta is one of like my inspirations, and he says, if you want to be Indigenous, just be Indigenous. So if it's, so for example, at home, I'm not a great gardener, but I have a hydroponic system, and that's how I garden right now. Eventually, I'm getting there. But I keep it, it's just those kinds of things though, like, and none of this would have happened unless I had had this space to like engage in these kinds of principles that we're talking about. And I don't know, for me, myself, I think about how growing up, I didn't necessarily have the education I wanted, outside or having teachers or elders to guide me, but I have an opportunity now. And so I think about the seventh generation, what can I do for, being, matriarch, I guess, in my family? What can I do for my nieces and nephews? What can I do for their children? And it always comes back to gardening. So I feel fortunate because my mother was a horticulture agent for the county growing up, and I wish I had all of her knowledge, but I definitely don't. My grandmother and grandfather also were farmers, and same on my fraternal side, so I just feel like no matter what I do with my life, as long as I am Indigenous wherever I am, I will leave a lasting impact on all of my relatives, and that's the kind of person I want to be. So through land and through that connection, like, I hope I can leave a small little imprint here and wherever I am.
Well, I think it's been really amazing to kind of see like a wave of a lot of like Indigenous peoples coming back to their ways. I think colonization has done so much damage, and I've seen a lot of like this younger generation coming back through the curiosity of like the medicines, traditional medicines, and how to use them and how to grow them. And so I think, like, for instance, just me being able to show my 5-year-old like how to smudge or how to use like the actual medicine in the proper way has been really satisfying to me. But I think like I've met so many young Indigenous people who have been kept from their traditional beliefs and traditional ways, whether that be through colonization directly or through religious reasons, and missing out on many traditions that they should be entitled to, but being dissuaded by religion itself. I feel like a lot more Indigenous youth are sharing those types of stories, and I think the gardens have been ways to like reconnect with the ways of knowing, and a path back to tradition in ways as an adult you can freely do and express. Whereas a lot of these youth or young adults had like been suppressed from that, whether through like a parent or whether through like an adoptive system where they weren't able to really practice their traditional beliefs. I think that's been really powerful, and that's been incredible to see. So I think like other Indigenous gardeners showing the next generation the way forward has been really powerful, and just new ways of doing things, that it doesn't have to be a huge garden. It can be as simple as a single pot in your house and start with that medicine. I think social media has been really incredible for Indigenous peoples in terms of learning and how to learn from another, whether you're on the different side of the world, has been really incredible. I know even just with experience with Jen and her working with a collective called Canoe Journey in Seattle, of like, hey, what is this, like, tea? How am I supposed to, like, they sent it to us, and like, how am I supposed to make it into tea? Like, how much water, like, how much this or that? Do you guys have seeds? I really like this, I'd like to make it myself. So those types of things of just reconnecting with our communities and learning about other Indigenous communities that I wasn't so familiar with has been really incredible. I'm really grateful for that, and just to be able, the ability to share what I do know, or you know, even just oral storytelling of things that I remember, like off of my father's reservation, being able to like stop at the side of the road and pick up Indian tea, take it home, dry it for the amount of time that was right, and then, you know, make myself and my sisters a cup of tea. Like that to me is just such an incredible memory. Like the smell itself, whenever I smell it now, I can see all those moments that have passed. So I really appreciate that, and I think like working with other like elders and just those who already know the way, they're not going to be here forever. So I think gaining that knowledge has been really incredible, and I'm just grateful for that, and continue to share as much knowledge as I have with anyone that I may connect with, but also with my son. So I really love that.
So with gardening, I think a lot of you mentioned how it provides a resource for us as a community, and the importance of sharing that, even with our younger age community members, because of course the more generations here in the U.S. They forget what it is like to live in the islands and to understand what our foods are. He talks about canned foods. I mean, we didn't have sugar and flour. Those things weren't, is not a norm in the Pacific Islander diet. But the healthier foods, the taro, taro plants, the bananas, and so I think to maybe have a greenhouse that, and I'll text Jake and say, hey, these guys have a greenhouse, you know. Because I understand that the season, the climate is not, friendly for the food that we grow. And so that's a dream, to be able to see that here. And so the excitement of the U having PI studies, and hopefully we can evolve, right? And have a greenhouse.
12 acres here.
Okay, I keep looking around. When you see me, I'm like turning around, and I'm like, okay, let's go. But yeah, so when I think of that, I think of all this collaboration and support, and to bring what health needs to be at. And so we have the secret recipe right here in this room. So yeah.
And if I could add on that, we're such humble people. So much has been taken away from us, so anything that we are given, we're just like, But that is not too much to ask for. I want the tallest, biggest greenhouse for your community.
They're taking notes over there. Those are the bosses over there.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
If this can happen with that much money, that can happen and should happen. Like, I know my partner's Kanaka. Having that abundance is doing something and sharing it is the way that you all operate, and it's beautiful. And I want that for you guys here, because you are such beautiful community members, and you do take care of everyone, and you think about all the Indigenous relatives here, and you include them in that process. And I personally feel your gratitude and that respect and welcoming everybody here. We all come from different places. This may not be my land, but we share this space together. And yeah, I want good things for you guys in a way.
Thank you so much. The question was about Indigenous integration, right? I'm just basking in these answers. I forgot what the question was. I think there are so many cool ways to integrate Indigenous knowledge and into what we're trying to do with our Little Garden program. But for me, I think one of the coolest results, I guess, of this is re-establishing connections that are intergenerational. And so having, really young kids learning from grandparents or great-grandparents who have living memory of growing these things in the islands that we don't necessarily have. And even though the context is different here, re-establishing that connection to me has been really, really rewarding to see. Because the reality is, as immigrant peoples, when we come here, we seek expertise outside of our community because we're new here. And so if we're looking to get into college or to get a home loan, if you're the first generation coming, the people at your sides are asking the same questions. And so we go outside, and then we almost put folks on a pedestal because we're grateful for the help that they've given us and the expertise that they have. And sometimes that comes at the detriment of acknowledging and honoring the expertise and the intellect and the wonderful depth of knowledge that we have in our own families and in our own communities, because we've relied on that expertise from outside. So at least with gardening, that's been a really cool thing to see. And Sia shared a story of one of the Rose Park gardening sites, even that individuals who weren't even part of that group, that was a formal group, notice these plants growing in the, as they drive by, and they'd see people out there who weren't part of the group, but they wanted to help, and they were watering, or they were just sitting in the shade and just admiring these, reminders of home, and then being able to work with the youth and be like, oh, why are you guys doing that? You need to do it like this, and those kinds of things. I think that integration has, or that experience has been really, really neat to see.
I think we have like maybe 10, 12 minutes or so for questions from the audience, if anyone wants to engage with our panelists. Just so much wisdom and yeah.
I would like to say that anybody who wants to be a part of like the Carry the Water, it's your garden. You can do whatever you think is going to take care of you and your relatives. If you're missing a medicine in your life and you want to share the abundance of that, like please come and grow that space is yours to do it. And just wanting it to be a safe space. You can go whenever you want to, like all ideas and all those things, and I think that's where we are at. We did have a clear vision, but I think the capacity, personal things that came up this past year, we've all gone through some crazy things, crazy hard things, and so however you want to show up in your capacity, like it's yours, the land's there. And we love you all. And in being awareness of you and being in a relationship with you, like we're able to take care of each other in different ways. So, and that's really important to me.
Yeah, so maybe we can just, everyone else, one of our questions that we wanted to sort of wrap up the event with was how people can get involved with your gardens, with your programs.
Social media is great, so you guys can follow the Og-Woi. They have a Facebook page, and then also an Instagram as well, and Pandos regularly plugs there are links on there. I think it's Saturday mornings typically, or Sundays, sorry, that volunteers can go and can be a part of the garden depending on what is going on during that season. But yeah, everyone is welcome. You can find us on Facebook, Og-Woi Garden, and
Okay, it's like the Og-Woi Garden and People's Orchard?
yeah.
The Og-Woi People's Orchard.
And it's actually not too far from here. It's really close.
Our acronym for the Utah Pacific Islander Health Coalition is upihc.org, and that's the best place to reach us, and also to learn about all the other great programming that we have outside of the Healthy Roots program that we do, especially in the springtime, as we're distributing these seedlings that students have grown around the valley to upwards of 50 families, right? We always appreciate volunteers on that plant distribution day. We don't have a great name for that, but and yeah, if you have experience or any tips for backyard gardening or small scale gardening, we're always looking for folks to help consult with as well.
If there aren't any other questions, we can thank our panelists for this incredible opportunity to learn and be together. So yeah, thank you all so much. We have some food outside. Please get some lunch, take food home. But yeah, and I think you're welcome to enjoy the space here. I think some of the staff from the Aviary are available to give tours. So yeah, we're hoping that we just end, but also that folks will still hang out and talk to each other, have some food, learn more about how you can get involved with these programs.